I don't just want to make games, even though this is a big production. I don't just want to make games for somebody else. I want to make my own vision for myself. So that drive to be creative in my own way drove me back to San Francisco. I quit. I was only there a year, but I just had to do it. So I quit, moved back, and I didn't have a lot of savings. I'd only been working 2 years. And I basically took all my savings and invested it in our first project. I had one overarching desire, and that is to create something new.
So today, as I said earlier, I have the entrepreneur's entrepreneur. So of course we know he hails from California. And before we go any further, I would like you to welcome, and I'm going to give you his nickname first, Captain Hoff. So Steve Hoffman, thank you so much for being a guest on today's podcast.
Dr. Patty Ann, it is fantastic to be here. I can't wait to talk to you.
All right. Thank you. And I really meant it when I said you are an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. But before we go any further, I have got to know the story because I looked for it and I couldn't find it. I'd like to know the story behind the nickname Captain Hoff. And one of the reasons why I'm so interested is because my husband went to the Merchant Marine Academy and he sailed on super oil tankers and he is Captain Mitch. So what's the story?
Captain Mitch, meet Captain Hoff.
So what's the story behind Captain Hoff? I got the Hoff. I figured that part out.
Yes, I am not a nautical captain. So okay. Mitch is the true nautical captain. I
think you're up there, though. He was down in the ocean. I think you were up in space. I
am up in space. At least my head is in the clouds. I am captain of the team. So it's Team FounderSpace. We have entrepreneurs from all over the globe. We bring them into Silicon Valley, and I coach them like a team captain and lead them, hopefully, to really grow, scale their businesses.
I love that. Can you hear me okay? Oh, why are we? Yeah. All right. I just lost you for a second. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay.
All right. So
do you want to go back and repeat?
Yeah, I'll do it. Don't worry. I'll have somebody edit it. Okay. Yeah. So I love that because as an entrepreneur and as a coach for entrepreneurs, you do need a captain of the ship, if you will, right? Because you need to be able to set the course and make sure that people are following the appropriate trajectory, because as we all know, with entrepreneurs, we all have the shiny object syndrome, right? So tell us, Steve, you have an incredible background, right? You're an award-winning author. You're the chairman and CEO of FounderSpace. You have some really big dogs listening to you, right? Like Qualcomm and Silicon Valley. Everybody who's anybody wants your ear. So how did you get into entrepreneurship? Like, did you grow up saying, I want to be Captain Hoff, or did you grow up saying, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer? Like, how did you get here? Like the real story, the real
story. I grew up wanting to be a filmmaker.
Where did you grow up? California?
I grew up in Davis, California.
Yeah. Okay.
And my father's a professor, and he of engineering, mechanical engineering. He actually worked
side of the brain.
Yes, he was actually he was a professor at first at MIT.
Brainiac, here we come.
And he was a professor. He was a rocket scientist, literally a rocket scientist. That was his dream.
I love this. Okay.
That's what he became. He taught the early astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, all these guys.
But he worked with NASA?
He didn't work with NASA. He just trained them at MIT and then moved out to California. I grew up wanting, my mom's an artist, so I grew up wanting to be a filmmaker. And I made 50 films by the time I graduated high school, 50 short films, pretty elaborate. People watched them. I had screenings and everything.
I'm teasing you.
And you could watch them too. But what I did was, my father came to me and he said, son, the future is computers. You have to study computers.
I think
And
he was right. I think he was sort of kind of right.
Looking back on it, he was right, because this was quite some time ago. And
when a rocket scientist tells you something, you take notes.
yeah, so I went and studied electrical computer engineering, got a degree in that, got a bunch of job offers, and then I decided to go to film school. So I
hated it. Did you just hate it, or the film was truly your calling?
I wanted to be creative. The bottom line, I wanted to be creative. So I went to film school. I got accepted at USC Film School.
No, but no easy feat, right?
No easy.
Because I went to NYU, and I had friends that went to Tisch School of the Arts.
Oh yeah, that's the other one I applied to.
There you go.
So I did it. I went to film school, graduated film school, then applied in Hollywood to get a job. And just because you go to film school does not mean you get a job in Hollywood, unless, there's nepotism, unless you know somebody in the industry. Unfortunately, I didn't. So I hustled like all people who want to get a job. And I'll tell you what I did to land my first. I wrote 150 letters to all the top executives in the film industry, like personal letters to each one. I got 3 responses out of 150. The first one, I got a phone call from the producer of Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. And we had a great conversation, but he told me he had no jobs. He just liked my letter.
I should know who that is, right? The producer? Who was that?
Yeah, it's a Star. It was so many years ago. I forgot his name, but he was the producer.
Good. Now I don't feel badly.
You can go to IMDb and actually look it up. I did was
I thought it was somebody famous that I should know, so I feel better now.
Yeah, I think he's, in the industry, he's pretty well known.
Yeah.
So I talked to him, nothing. Then I went to Disney. They called me in for a job. I met with the head of production. The interview is going great. Looked like I would have that job. And then I blew it.
What happened?
I totally blew it. They asked me, do you watch Disney movies? And I said, I had just gone to film school, and I started rambling off on all the great directors I had seen in film school, over the past 3 years, and, how much I loved them. And by the time I was done, the person couldn't wait to get me out of her office.
No, wait a minute. Forgive me, but what was wrong with that? Did you not address the Disney? What was that the wrong?
The head of production there, she wanted to hear that I watched and loved Disney movies.
That's it.
That's what she wanted. And I just started talking about French New Wave films, Fellini.
You're right, you blew it.
Yeah, I went to I just graduated film school. I saw all these amazing films, and I just started talking about all the movies I loved, and none of them were Disney movies. And so by the time I was done, she said, this isn't a good fit. So I learned something like, so if you're trying to get a job in Hollywood, don't ramble off all these artistic movies.
You're reminding me. Do you know who Saul Blinkoff is?
Yes.
Right. So I interviewed Saul, and he did like the animation for all Disney. But what you reminded me of is he was telling me the story about he wanted to go to. I forget how he wanted. I think he always did animation, but his sister would come in and say, "Hey, Saul, how's that job hunt going?" And he said he wrote and he was relentless and he must have gotten like 150 rejections or something. And I forget exactly how he got into Disney, but it was not easy. And
not easy. No. And I didn't get in. So I got one more response from my 150 letters. And that was from the head, the CEO and chairman of a company called Freeze Entertainment. And they, in Hollywood, were big at the time. They had done like 150 TV movies and miniseries and all these different projects. And he invited me in, and he gave me a job. And I started at the bottom of the rung. I started as a reader reading scripts. That was the only job I could get.
That's considered the bottom? That's considered the bottom?
You barely get paid enough to buy a pizza after like a week of work. Like they pay you almost nothing. You read the script, you write up a synopsis, you hand it in. So basically all you are is a human filter for bad material.
So so today it's AI, and they know. So you summarize the film, whether they're going to Yay or
Yeah, I
nay?
summarized it and then I gave it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Should they read it or shouldn't they read it? That was my job.
I think that's pretty powerful, though.
It is. You're kind of a gatekeeper, but
Yeah.
you are not a decision maker, and you are. And there's a bunch of us. Like there are a lot of readers. So,
You're in the
but
dungeon.
we're in the dungeon. We're at the bottom rung. But I kept going back to him like every 2 weeks and saying, "I can do more. I went to film school. I could write. I could direct. Help me." And sure enough, within a month and a half, he promoted me to researcher.
He
Then
appreciated the chutzpah.
I did the chutzpah. Then I worked my butt off as a researcher, promoted me again to a development executive. I was a development executive. And then I met the founder of a game company called Sega. And it was at the height of the market at that time. It just surpassed Nintendo. And he's actually an American who set it up in Japan after World War II. And he invited me he said he wants to hire somebody from Hollywood to come over there and design games. So I went to Sega.
Wait, how did you meet him?
One of the producers in our company, it was his cousin. So he said, "Oh, I want to introduce you." So I just took that opportunity because it was even better than what I had. And I went to Japan. This is how I got back into tech. I had the electrical computer engineering degree, went to Japan for this big game company. And we were working on a project with Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson was starring in our 3D simulation, computer simulation ride that was going to Vegas. Big deal. It was an amazing project. After that,
hang on. You didn't speak Japanese, did you?
Zero.
And did you meet Michael Jackson? It was all virtual.
No, he was on the project. He came to our headquarters.
How was he? Give us the scoop. How was he? Was he weird? Was he normal back then? What was the deal?
Well, it wasn't like we were best friends, so I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is, he's very nice. He was very nice. He looked just like he does in the pictures, just like your white glove and all. Very pale. He loved. Basically what he did is he didn't really understand what we were doing or how we were creating these. We were like on the very forefront of 3D graphics, really pushing the limits. And we had some amazing talent in there, like just incredible artists. And he loved it. He kept saying, "Oh, this is amazing. I love it." So he's just a nice,
great.
I was kind of in that design creative team, but our interaction with him, he was starring in our thing. So he was like he was the pilot of our 3D spaceship.
That's cool. But if he was polite to you, then he was a polite guy, right? Because you be polite to everybody. You don't just be polite to the top people.
Yeah. And so we had a great time and kind of helping design this project with him. And then I decided, this is awesome working for a Japanese game company, but I got to start my own business. So that's the answer to your question. I quit again for my second time. And literally I had one job for a year, the development executive. Then I had the Michael Jackson game job. Then I quit. And I said, everything's going on right now. The internet is about to take off. It's all happening in Silicon Valley. Got to get back there. I can't stay in Japan. Got to start my own game company. Went back, launched my game company, was a big hit. We did our first game was called Gazillionaire, and it was all about making money, being an entrepreneur, which is what I teach now, being an entrepreneur. And it was really popular, went into all the schools, got distributed around the world. We made a series of these business simulation games. And then I launched an internet company where we did interactive television, where I tied in the technology to Hollywood. And I just kept going. And eventually I founded I did 3 venture funded startups, and then I launched FounderSpace, which is what I do now.
Go back for a minute though. And you said you're in Japan, you're working with Michael Jackson, you're on the cutting edge of 3D, right? Which is really cool. And you said you knew you had to start your own company. For the listeners, tell them what you knew that made you know you had to start your own company. Because right now you're sort of kind of living the dream. So what was it?
living the dream in Japan. It was an amazing experience, working with Michael Jackson, being at this game company, designing cutting edge creative projects, which is exactly what I wanted to do. But I started to read in Wired magazine when I was in Japan, everything that was going on with the well and the early internet. And I got this thing in my head that said, I can't stay in Japan. Something is happening in Silicon Valley. Something really important is happening, and I have to get back there. And I don't just want to make games, even though this is a big production. I don't just want to make games for somebody else. I want to make my own vision for myself. So that drive to be creative in my own way drove me back to San Francisco. I quit. I was only there a year, but I just had to do it. So I quit, moved back, and I didn't have a lot of savings. I'd only been working 2 years. And I basically took all my savings and invested it in our first project, which was.
So you knew you wanted to be the captain of your ship, if you will.
I knew.
To be visionary, right?
I knew that I had one overarching desire, and that is to create something new. And I wanted to put myself in the best position to do that. And I thought having my own company is the best position. I will lack money. I won't have the funding, but I will have complete freedom to do whatever I want.
Okay. So now you said you came back and you developed your team. How did you go about doing that? Especially for all the entrepreneurs listening and the new entrepreneurs, because who you surround yourself with is so critical. So you're out of the loop for a year, which is not that long, but it can also be forever. So how did you get yourself set up?
Well, my team was very small because we had no funding. It was just my own money that I'd saved up after 2 years of work after graduating college, which wasn't a huge amount since I'd been traveling. But so what I did was I looked for really creative people. So I found some artists who were amazing artists. I found a sound designer, musician. She was incredible. And I did what all entrepreneurs do, is I did most of the heavy lifting myself. I actually coded because I had that skill. I coded the first games. I wrote them. I designed them. I created actually the majority of the artwork for these games. And my wife was also joined me in creating the artwork, and she taught herself to code. So as we were doing it, she became she also coded the projects. And we launched the first one on an extremely low budget. I think the total budget was $3,000 that we put in.
And how did you do? Was that the gazillion one?
Gazillionaire, yes. And Gazillionaire did incredibly well. Like at first, we were one of the first people to actually post games online. And this was pre-internet days. So you couldn't post them for anybody to browse on a web browser. You could only post them on what they called a BBS, which is a bulletin board system.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And people started to download them. Our first purchase came from this guy who wrote us a letter and put the cash in an envelope and mailed it to us. And we would mail him the floppy disks. That was our high-tech way of getting our product to them. And he basically downloaded the shareware version, the free version, and then he bought it. His name was Lord Geck. And he looked just like the type of person you would imagine hanging out on the internet in the early days. He was Lord Geck. He was this big guy with this goatee. And we invited him over for dinner since he was our very first customer and got to know him. He was an amazing guy. So he bought our first game. And other people started to buy these games. They started to sell. We were like selling. And then they got downloaded. The number one computer game company in the United States, in the world actually, for computer games, not video games, was Microprose Spectrum Holobyte. They did SimCity and all these famous games and Civilization and all this stuff. They came to us. And they basically, their QA team, the ones who test quality assurance, they test the products. They all got hooked on our game. So they came and they offered us a publishing deal. And I looked and I suddenly realized they really wanted our game. They actually needed it because they had spent millions of dollars to produce their big game, their big title that was going to make their name. And it was the Star Trek franchise. So their Star Trek game was about to launch, but it had been delayed. The production had gone slower, and they were going to miss booking the revenue for the holidays, for Christmas. And that would drive they're a public company, that would kill their share price. So they needed a product they could launch overnight. Here was our little game that we'd made for $3,000. They had spent millions, and I figured out they needed it. And so all the rules of publishing are the publisher owns all the rights. But I said, absolutely not. Once I figured out they had to close this deal, I was like, no, we will control all the rights. You will just get, we can release sequels, blah, 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 blah. You'll just get the right to release this once. And they accepted our terms. The game went out. That game did incredibly well. And even the reviews for our game Gazillionaire were better when they finally released their Star Trek game, the first Q1. Our reviews were way better than their reviews.
Wow.
And they were mad. They were angry. They were like, why is your game getting better reviews than ours? And it all came down because I loved games, and I understood how to design a game, not with a lot of money, but that was really fun to play.
Passion, right.
Yeah, passion.
So they were really mad at you? That was their ego.
Of course, this CEO had greenlit millions of dollars on this other game, and they had got our game for almost nothing, but we got a big share of the royalties, right? Sure. And he was upset that, that their game didn't get as good of reviews, the one that they had basically bet the company on. So anyway, it went really well. We controlled the rights in perpetuity. So we are still selling Gazillionaire today, decades later.
Wow.
Decades. It's on Steam, the big game site, and it's doing incredibly well. It's still, people love it.
I know now it's people are realizing there's no financial literacy, and people really want the money knowledge games.
It teaches people how to manage their money. Yeah. So first we released it as an entertainment product, but then the schools picked up on it, and it got used in hundreds of schools. It got used in even the California penal system used it to reform convicts to help, with recidivism and, lower the rates. And so corporations end up buying our business simulation games. Yeah. So it turned out to be really good.
Well,
very good.
Okay, so that was your first game. Did the luck continue? Was there a time where, it's rarely a straight trajectory. Did you ever hit a bump in the road?
Of course. So our first three games did well. They were businesses.
Really?
We had Gazillionaire, Zappitalism, Profitania, all the next thing we did, it was the .com time, right? So the internet had come along, and I can't continue to make games. The internet is here now. I have to do this internet thing. Right. So I teamed up with my old film school friend, my friend from film school. And she was working in New York, and she, with a programmer, had released this product for Microsoft, this massively multi-user game for Microsoft, one of the very first massively multi-user games in the world. And they owned the IP for this, the underlying IP. And I was like, let's team up. And we decided, because we had both gone to film school, and we were both kind of in this cross between film, entertainment and technology, we decided we would take this platform. We called it Spider Dance, because we were always spider dancing, which was art slang for brainstorming. When you get excited and you start dancing around because you love the idea, that's spider dancing. So we decided we would release this as a platform for interactive television. So we would basically power people to get together in real time online and play along with TV shows, mostly TV game shows. That was our vision. But we had no customers in Hollywood. And since I'd only worked in Hollywood a year and she hadn't worked at all, we knew nobody in Hollywood. But what we did was we found out through the grapevine that MTV was about to release, they wanted to release an interactive TV game show, a music trivia game show with Ahmed Zappa, Frank Zappa's son, as the star. And but there was no technology to do this. They had no technology. So they were hunting for somebody to build the technology for them. What we did was we called MTV. We got the name of the senior vice president in charge of this, and we called him up and we said, hey, we're Spider Dance. We can do this. We have this technology. And guess what happened?
They bought it.
He never called us back. He never called. He didn't call. And we left message after message. And
you need to write him a letter.
This was the days when big media companies, they didn't want to work with a no-name startup that they had never heard of. That was literally 4 people working out of their homes. They didn't want to do this. But my friend, she got invited to speak at CES because of her previous job, and she held on to that speaking slot. So she was on this panel for interactive entertainment because she had done the previous project for Microsoft, and she just started talking about our company, like what we had and how we we're going to build a platform for interactive television. And literally when she was done, this guy comes running up from the audience, pushes through everybody else, and goes right up to her and says, I am the senior vice president of MTV Interactive. You have exactly what we need. And she looked at him and she said, I know. We've been leaving messages on your voicemail for the past couple of weeks. And there within 2 weeks, we had a deal. And we basically built it out and launched it, became a huge hit, like 1 million users. And in those days, that was insane. Absolutely. Right. Even now you get 1 million users, you're really happy. But in these days, it was unheard of. And we became the preeminent interactive TV platform for the industry. We signed on Warner Brothers, we signed on NBC, we signed on History Channel, Game Show Network, you name it. They were all coming to us. We are on top of the world. And you ask if I ever hit a speed bump. Well, I'll tell you.
But hang on a second. It's sounding, for the listeners, though, I want them to hear this, though. It is sounding like you're so lucky. And I'm not saying that you didn't work it a little bit, but I'm not hearing you down to your last dollar, almost broke. Like, what was the gap of time between calling the SVP and the panel discussion? Okay,
let me tell you. So prior to us, when the SVP got a hold of us, MTV wrote a check for $350,000. And in these days, you got to think back in time, that was a big amount of seed funding. And we negotiated a deal again where we kept all the IP rights so we could sell it to everybody else. So $350,000 to us, having no money and launching this, seemed like a huge amount of money.
But how did you have no money? Didn't you just make all this money from Gazillionaire?
Not no money, but not a lot of money. Okay.
And not money from this project yet. Okay.
No money from this project with my partners on this project. So we all put in some money to this company, but we didn't have a lot of money. And we had been running up until this point for close to 5 months. So we had been spending money during this time, iterating on the projects. And we took in that money and we started to grow our business. And then what we found out was we had promised that we could launch this interactive TV platform by the time they launched the show, which basically gave us roughly 6 months to build out the whole platform from where we had it. And we had no idea how hard it would be. It was incredibly hard because they didn't have cloud hosting. There was no AWS. We literally had to go to a hosting center and build out all our servers and spend all the money and wire the whole thing up. And it was hugely expensive. And meanwhile, MTV kept asking us, will this work? Will this work? And we kept saying, don't worry, it's going to work, because they didn't trust us. We were this little company. We had 9 people now. We're still very small. We're all working day and night. And we knew we had to raise more capital. Like, we needed more money because our bank account was getting very, very low. So we went to venture capitalists, and all the venture capitalists were like, I don't know, we don't know. We finally found a venture capitalist who said, yes, I will fund you. I will write you a check for $5 million. and we worked out the whole agreement. We literally spent $60,000 on legal agreements to work out the whole funding.
Wow.
We get it closed, and it's literally a month and a half before, 6 weeks before we're due to launch with MTV. We get the deal closed and we said, okay, send us the check. And you know what they said? They said, I think we're going to wait until after you launch to make sure it works. And we said, are you serious? We need the money now. And they go, no, we're going to wait. And so we were like, we're so busy with, we said, okay, we'll wait 6 weeks. We can go 6 more weeks, but then we'll be totally out of money.
Right.
So we went 6 weeks, we got the product ready, and MTV have been advertising this day and night on their channel, Web Riot. They've been putting up ads and with our name, Spider Dance, because that was in our contract. So we got on MTV day and night, our name, and all these crazy ads. So excitement was building. Now, nobody had ever launched a product that would have so many simultaneous users logging on at once. It's not like today, right? Nobody had ever done this. And we, and people were supposed to play on their laptops and watch it on TV. And it was supposed to synchronize frame accurate, because if it was a little off, you could cheat on the show. Like if you saw what is happening on the show, you could cheat online. So it had to be perfectly frame accurate. And then we had to take the results from online and actually feed them back live into the TV broadcast. Nobody had done that. So all of this stuff was brand new. We get ready. We launched the product at the day of the first launch, and users start to pour in, like just pour in. The numbers are going up and up and up and up and up and up. And this is like 10 minutes before it's about to go live. All of a sudden, everything goes down. All of our servers, everything goes down. You talk about a moment of stress. I literally collapsed on the floor. The thing had crashed. And then the next thing that happens, guess what happens next?
What happens next?
The phone rings. I pick it up, and it's the senior vice president of MTV. And he's like, what the blank and going down. He literally said, TV doesn't blanking crash. It doesn't crash. TV doesn't crash.
No,
and I'm like,
Houston, we have a problem.
And you told me this wouldn't crash, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, hold on a minute. Let me call our engineers and figure out what's happening, because I was on the West Coast. They were in New Jersey. Called them up on the phone. And I was like, our system crashed. What can we do? And they're like, just hold on. We are under attack. We're under a denial of service attack right now. Hackers are bringing us down. They are bombarding our servers. And I was like, there was no big firewall protection companies and all. They didn't exist. It was all homegrown. So they literally started to manually block IP addresses like on this thing. And
so it wasn't really crashing as much as it was being hacked.
It was being hacked. And within 5 minutes, it was all back online. It went back up. And I call up the vice president of MTV, and I was like, it's back on. And literally, it was right before the show was about to launch. And it launched, and it went perfectly, smoothly. We could handle all the users. Everything we'd planned worked. It was beautiful.
Yeah, he saw his job go out the window for a brief shining moment.
Yeah, he thought he would be fired. That's why he was so mad.
Right.
And because he had chosen us, he had taken a huge risk on this unknown company. So it went beautifully. Everything was great, but we were committed to run the show for months and months and months. And we had almost we were bleeding money this whole time. So we were like down to almost no money at this point. So I call up the investors as soon as it launches. And I'm like, you've got to fund us. You've write that check. It launched. It was successful. We agreed. Everything's done. Send the check. Guess what they said?
No.
They didn't say no. They said, we're happy to send you the money. You did a great job, but we decided we want half the valuation. We think you're overvalued.
Didn't you have all this stuff in contracts already?
Yeah, but they can change it. We hadn't signed it. It was all done, ready to be signed.
So what did you spend $60,000 on?
All the legal work. They were supposed to sign it, but they refused to sign it until after it launched. So there's it was just sitting there. So they're like, okay, we will sign the contract if you agree to half the value. They were squeezing us. They were sharks. They're not called vulture capitalists for nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
They knew we were over a barrel and that they could get this at half price. And so we had a choice.
That so sucks. I mean, good Lord. Special
Good
place.
Lord.
These guys.
This is brutal. I talked to my partners and I'm like, we have a choice. We can sign this, get our $5 million at half the valuation, but then we have to live with these guys. They're going to be on our board of directors. Yeah. We have to talk to them. Do we even like them now? So we decided, we say like, either we have to live with them with the 5 million or we just walk away. And you know what we did?
You walked away.
We walked away. We walked away and it felt great until we got out the door. Because when we got out the door, we realized we had no money. We had to keep running the show. We couldn't pay any of our employees. We couldn't pay the hosting fees. We were absolutely in trouble.
But your beta was successful. So you didn't have nothing, right?
We had nothing because it was right before Christmas and Thanksgiving. And nobody funds at this time. Mm-hmm. It's like dead waters until after CES, which is pretty much in the new, February. So here we are in November. We got to wait till February to get funded. But we didn't stop. We just kept going and hustling. And then I ended up meeting the president of Adobe. At that time, it was called Macromedia. And they had just released this product called Flash, which some people may not even remember, but it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And they said, can you get this working with Flash instead of what you're doing? And I looked at him and I said, if you can fund us, we can do it. and he said,
no, that's your model.
He said, great. I will do that. We will fund you, but we can't do it unless a name VC leads the round.
Right. Like they usually do. Yeah.
And they're all away on vacation. So it'll have to be next year. So we went back to CES the next year and we were so depressed because we had no money and no commitments. And I tell entrepreneurs out there, we were literally, we got the cheapest motel because we had already got our tickets there and everything, but we downgraded to the cheapest motel, scummiest motel in Vegas. So we were so depressed, we could hardly get out of our beds to go to CES. That's because we were dying. We were begging our employees to keep working. We were begging our hosting provider to keep giving us, credit to run the system.
Yeah.
And we get back, we go after CES, we got our first meeting. The Adobe introduced us to one of the top VCs on Sand Hill Road, and a real VC. On our first meeting, we go into their office, and I literally knew when we walked into that office that if I didn't close the funding, we would, no matter what I did, we would go bankrupt. Mm-hmm. We would go. We would be dead. So I went into that office, and we're pitching them, and the president came along with me, who made the introduction of Adobe. He was sitting in the meeting. I was like, why is he coming to my pitch meeting? Like, he already heard me pitch. He already said yes. Well, he was coming to see the reaction of the VC, because if this VC poked holes in our business, he was not going to introduce us to anybody else. He wanted to see what that VC said. Mm-hmm. So it got into this meeting, and I'm pitching my heart out. Like, the first thing I learned is you don't tell any venture capitalist you're out of money, because I did that before.
Oh, no.
So I literally said, everything's great. We have this deal with MTV. We launched, the show is really successful. And, blah, 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 blah. And he looked at me. He was stone-faced the entire meeting. No response. And as soon as the meeting's done, guess what he did?
He writes you a check.
No. He gets up and leaves. He said, excuse me, I got to go. And so I'm left there with the president of, Adobe, and we're sitting there, and he's looking at me, and we're like, we don't know what's going on, because he didn't give any reaction whatsoever. And then, it was literally like 10 minutes. And then he comes back in the room, and he's like, sits down, and he says, you know what? I want to make you an offer. And he slides a term sheet across the table. right there, the term sheet. He goes, but I don't want to give you $5 million. I want to give you $7 million. And I looked at him and I'm thinking, 7 million? We've been struggling just to get 5. Mm-hmm. And you know, if he gives 7 million at the same valuation, it's actually a better deal for him because, you know, I pitched him the same valuation the previous investors had said no to. And here he was offering me 7 at that, but I didn't want to seem desperate because I know if I give even a whiff of desperation, you know, we're dead. So what I said is, no, we only asked for $5 million. We don't need 7. But let me tell you what, I will split the difference with you. I will take 6 million if you can close this deal in 2 weeks. And he said, yes. We had it. We got it. He closed the deal. He literally closed the deal in 6 weeks. We were able to save our team, save the show, and then sign up all these other customers. So it worked out, but it was incredibly painful process.
Wow. You probably have so many stories like that. Okay, let me just shift for a moment. When you are coaching entrepreneurs, what do you look for? And what do you see as that person has it so they'll be successful?
So I see a couple things. One, you have to have the drive. You have to believe you can do it. And if you don't have that drive, you're never going to get there. That's number one. Number two, I like to see people who are not just following everybody else, but actually going out into uncharted waters. Because the type of businesses that we invest in, that we work with, those are businesses that are they literally have to change everything in order to break through. Mm-hmm. They cannot accept the status quo. So they are going to break the status quo. That means they're going to do something crazy. They're going to do something ridiculous. They're going to do something that hasn't been done. And so I'm looking for creative thinkers along those lines. And then number three, I look at who that person has with them. You mentioned the team, right? So I look, who did they surround themselves with? The reason we were so successful in doing this groundbreaking project is because I had amazing partners. My partners, you know, the technical lead, the head of engineering, my other partner from film school, they were absolutely brilliant. They were brilliant. Without them, we couldn't have done it. My wife and I were also on the team, so there were 4 of us. And so look at their partners and interview their partners. Like, so talk to who the team is, not just who the person, because no one person ever builds $1 billion company. Even if they take credit for it, like Elon Musk loves taking credit for it all, he didn't build those companies. He has amazing teams that are in his shadow that are doing the hard work. So that's, I figure really good leaders attract really good teams, right? They wait for the right people. They don't just take whoever comes along. And that combination, if you get that combination, it's usually a winner. Maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but they will figure it out eventually. Okay,
so what was a situation where you thought they had it and you were surprised and they didn't?
You know, there are people, there are problems that you cannot see. This is why even the best venture capitalists in Silicon Valley with the most successful track record, they will always have failures. And the failure rates are
more failures than winners, all of them.
All of them. There's nobody with more winners than failures. Anybody who tells you that is lying. If maybe they've only done one investment and it's all winner.
That's right.
But if you do more than one, you're going to have, the odds are going to get to you. Like, even because you cannot see the future, you cannot see all the problems that a team may have. So I've had teams that I thought were brilliant, like I thought were really great. Like there's one with this ghost kitchen idea, and they had a software platform for that. And this was before ghost kitchens were really huge and scaled out. And I looked at the team and their idea, and I thought, this is brilliant. You're going to make it. Turned out that the founders ended up fighting, right? They did not end up getting along. I couldn't see it, but there were too many animosities underneath, and they couldn't work out their details, and they ended up separating. That killed the company.
So it's so interesting to say that, because I work with a lot of co-founders. I help I help find founders pick the appropriate,
Which is so hard to do.
right, to vet them. And then
So,
when they
yeah.
come together, especially if the VCs put money in, not that they necessarily care about the co-founders, but they care about their investment. So I'm brought in, or a partner will bring me in and say, help us with this because we're killing each other, to your point. So you get that. My understanding is if you have a product or a service that's viable and needed, the reason the business is not successful is because of the relationships.
Yeah, the relationships comes down to, either they don't trust each other, they don't
All that
communicate well. There's a
Right.
lot of different reasons. One could have medical problems. You can't predict
Right.
all these things. Like there can be somebody who drops out and they're the key technical lead behind everything because they have medical issues or family issues, or their wife
Yep.
doesn't, or
Yep.
husband doesn't, they're getting
That could be-
divorced,
Yep.
whatever. So
Yep.
there's so many things you cannot see.
Yeah.
And then the markets change. Like what's hot one day, like AI is hot right now,
Right.
isn't hot the next day.
Well,
We've
just
seen
look at
this.
COVID changed. I mean, all of a sudden,
Everything.
everybody's on Zoom.
Right.
Zoom's been
Like
around a while, but
yeah, Zoom's shot up and now it shot down and maybe it'll shoot up again. And,
exactly.
these things are out of the control of even the smartest investors in the world. You cannot predict them. So there's always something. I've had companies die. Like I've had many more companies die than succeeded that we worked with. And
Yeah.
it's the earlier you come in on a company, the more volatile it is, the more
Yes.
fragile it is, the more the odds are it will die at some point along
Sure.
the way.
Sure. So when have you watched a company die and you could have prevented it, but the entrepreneurs wouldn't listen to you, even though they're paying you to coach them?
Yes.
It's like your
And
kids. I don't know if you have children, but that's your kids. Like
this happens all the time,
really?
So, oh yeah, people have an idea in their head and they literally are not going to change their idea. So, you would be surprised. So most of the businesses I see, the vast majority of businesses I see, there's a problem with them. There's a fundamental problem. I'll tell them, your business isn't scalable. Like it will not scale how you have it. And they won't listen. They just won't hear me. And they'll keep on the same path. I mean, they're smart. They have something. If they changed it, they might be able to succeed in a bigger way, but they don't want to change it. They do not want to do it. So
Their ego, or it's their baby? Like what is it?
So it's a combination. It's a combination of their personality.
Mhm.
Like, even if they have a low ego, but a lot of entrepreneurs naturally have a big one. But even if they happen to have be a humble person, a lot of times they have bought into a set of assumptions and a vision for their company. And if you start to tell them that isn't going to fundamentally work, like an entrepreneur came in and pitched me on this idea where they had this app, and that they were going to make all their money off advertising.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, this app is kind of a niche app. It's like appeals to certain people at certain times. They only use it when it was an emergency app, right? Where if people are in trouble, they would use it. And I go, how many people are going to actually log into this on a daily basis and have an emergency to watch your ads? It's not going to work. It's
by definition, it's an emergency.
Right. And they just wouldn't hear it. They wouldn't hear it. I was like, if you have a small select user base, you cannot monetize it through ads. Don't put in ads. The ads make no sense. And some people didn't hear. Other people came to me with social networks. And I'm like, what is fundamentally different about your social network? And then they would rattle off all these things that were different about their social network. And I was like, that's not fundamentally different. Those are like cosmetic differences. Like you need to fundamentally offer a different value to your customer that none of these other social networks are offering. Are you doing that? Like, where is it? Like when Snap first came out, they had the disappearing messages. That was like a fundamental thing that caught on with teens, right? And they were targeting a different demographic, much younger than Facebook was targeting college students and up. So, they had fundamental differences. You look at these social networks, TikTok came out of nowhere, but it was all video, and they had a unique way of scrolling through, and they had unique algorithms. So, most of these entrepreneurs will say there's a difference between their product and other products, but it's not a big enough difference that it's going to make any difference.
Differentiate.
I could go on and on and on with different startups for different reasons, but one entrepreneur came to me, and I was like, you have a great product. You have an amazing team, like this amazing team with backgrounds. You've sold a company before, but you're trying to raise money at too high a valuation. Like, just because you have all those things, the market isn't there. The market for venture capital right now is at half or less the valuation you're asking for. And I think it's less than half, substantially less. If you want to raise money, do it. This entrepreneur, who was brilliant, who had everything going for him, literally said no. He goes, I am not going to lower my valuation. And I said, and I introduced him to a bunch of investors. I was like, well, let me introduce you to investors. Listen to them. And he introduced to all these investors, and they were like, this is great, but the valuation's too high. They told him. He wouldn't listen to them. He goes, we will find the right investor. What ended up happening was a year and a half later, I dropped him at that point. A year and a half later, he came back to me and said, we got funded. They ended up getting funded for a small amount of money at the evaluation I originally told them. But they had wasted a year and a half of time trying to get that higher valuation. Wow. People get things stuck in their head and they can't get it out. It could be all those reasons I told you, their product, the differences, the valuation. People get something stuck in their head and they don't want to hear it.
What was a successful startup that surprised you? You thought, no way, this is going to fly.
Oh, there's a lot of startups that were successful that I didn't necessarily know how good they would be. So there's one. It's a startup called Grub Market.
Okay.
And Grub Market was in the online food distribution, and they were doing fresh foods like meats and stuff directly to consumers from the farm. And at first I thought, this is a hard business. There had been many startups that tried this before. They didn't get a lot of traction in the food business. It's expensive to deliver. Even Amazon is struggling to make their food business pay, these big companies. And this was well before the big companies, but it was after Webvan and a bunch of others tanked doing the same model. So they were doing this, and I thought, this probably won't work, but he's a smart guy and he's got a good team. Let's see what happens. So he works, he goes through FounderSpace. He raises a bunch of money when he's with us. And then he goes to Y Combinator, another big startup accelerator, YC, raises even more money, starts doing well. But what really took off with his business, the original model wasn't what made him great. The original model is he figured out all the software and built out a platform for efficiently getting food directly from farms to consumers. And he is monetizing that whole supply chain. And that underlying technology is what has made his business from a business that probably would still be struggling to a business that is ready to IPO now. They're getting ready to IPO. Yeah. So you don't always see these, but he figured out in the process of doing this that there was a much bigger opportunity that he could make a lot more money after.
So you are so passionate. Like I'm sitting on my edge listening to you speak. You're so passionate. What was your favorite? I'm going to ask you your favorite child. What was your favorite company that took off?
My favorite company that took off was probably Equbot, EQUBOT.
Okay.
They came to me very early on, and they said, this is a while back, years ago, and they said, we want to launch the first ETF, exchange traded fund powered by AI. And I was like, oh my God, you guys want to do this? This is like, do it. Like, you aren't financial guys. One was from Stanford, one was from Berkeley. They're not financial people. They're not Wall Street. And I go, but yeah, if you can figure this out, I would buy that ETF. and they figured it out. When they launched out of FounderSpace, they literally got written up in every, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Fortune, Inc. magazine, Forbes, everybody covered them. And they overnight, without raising venture capital, they basically had $2 billion under management.
Wow.
And then they took this product, which they're still growing, and they offered it as a service to big financial institutions. Any company that wants to manage their whole portfolio by AI can use their platform. So they've really grown. They've done an amazing job.
Wow. That gives you so much joy. I can hear it.
Yeah, and to work with them from an early stage, and help them along the way, in every way I could. It's just a pleasure. And I'm working with more companies now that I just love. Like, I love when you love the entrepreneurs, like you as people, like you really connect with them. You've experienced this in your work, and they're doing good work, and they're very creative, and they're really pushing the boundary. It's a lot of fun. That's why I love what I do, because I wanted to be creative. And I end up being creative with all these companies, creative thinking with all these.
What do you prefer more? Starting your own companies or helping the entrepreneurs launch their companies?
Well, right now, this is my dream job, because I did my own companies. I went through all the ups and downs, and there are a lot of ups and downs I didn't tell you about. And this is fun because I don't have to the downs aren't really my downs. I suffer when they suffer, but I'm with them for a shorter period of time. Now, I'm not as invested as they are, right? And I have a much smaller stake in their companies, but emotionally, I get more of the ups than the downs.
Yeah.
And I get variety. Like, I get to work with all these amazing, brilliant people and really help them at the most critical stage of their business, which is the formulation and the figuring out of what they're doing, which for me, I wrote a whole book about this, Surviving a Startup, which is like, if you have entrepreneurs out there who want to figure out how to figure out what business works, it's like in this book, Surviving a Startup, because it's basically everything I go through with the entrepreneurs to figure out, how do you make their business work? What do you do to get to that next level? What's the really practical things you need to do? So that's that stuff, and giving people help along the way at that critical stage is very rewarding.
Yeah, I can see that. So you've written 2 other books. Tell the listeners about your other books.
So my other books is Make Elephants Fly. And the elephant is your big idea, that dream you have, but it's so big, how could it fly? Like, it's an elephant. It doesn't have wings, unless it's Dumbo. But how do you make it fly? And the book it's a book on innovation, radical innovation. So how do you take that idea, radically innovate, so you're not like everybody else, so you're radically different, so that you're a leap ahead of them, and you can actually launch a company that could grow big, right? That won't just be
purple cow. Make a purple.
Yeah, the purple cow. Yeah, another great book. And then my other book is about another subject I'm passionate about, and that is about emerging technologies. So it's about artificial intelligence, CRISPR gene editing. It's about brain-computer interfaces, all these new technologies, which are literally transforming the world we live in. And what impact will they have on society? How will they transform business? How will they personally impact our lives as they evolve? And we're seeing this now with AI. A lot of that I wrote in my book that's actually manifested itself right now. The book isn't that old. It's pretty new, but it's still like AI is moving so fast. Right. But also I wrote about it with gene editing technologies, anti-aging processes, how we're going to connect our brains to the internet, all the stuff, AR and VR. So it's called The 5 Forces.
So awesome. So awesome. All right. So I could talk to you forever. I love your passion and your enthusiasm. It's contagious. It absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So 2 more questions. One is, what's the last book you reread and why?
Oh, so I try to read a new book every week. So I love books, and I read a lot of, because I think you learn a lot, because all the smartest people in the world, a lot of them have written books, and they put all their best ideas into these books. Yep. So you get in a very concise format. So I'm constantly reading books. I don't just read technology books or business books. I read great literature. I read books on anthropology, books on sociology, books on psychology.
Renaissance man.
Well, no, because these all give you ideas for how to do things, right? This is what entrepreneurs need to do. That's why I'm telling you, because don't just read one type of book. If you really want to have new ideas, you got to like find all the best minds in the world and connect the dots. That's how it works. So greatest books. So there's so many amazing books out there. It's really hard, but I'm going to give you a very practical book for entrepreneurs that I love.
Now, this
every
is the book
time.
that you reread.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that book is called Shoe Dog, and it's written by Phil Knight.
Phil Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a wonderful book.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful book about the journey of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So
that is a great book.
Yes.
That is a great book. Okay, that's great. That's great. And then what is the one song you can't live without?
You ask great questions. All your questions are good.
Thank you.
So this is, I would say play that funky music.
White Boy.
White Boy. I love that song. I don't know why. I just love that song.
It's very upbeat. It's very upbeat. Okay.
I love his voice too. It's so 70s.
I feel like music is a window to somebody's soul. That's why I like that question.
Yes.
And then I lied. I have one more question for you. What?
And I love one-hit wonders. They come out with that's a group called Wild Cherry. Nobody's ever heard of.
Yep.
I've heard of it. Yeah, you heard of it. But these one-hit wonders are great. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks. Okay. Then the other question is the last question, which I promise is, what's the answer to the question you wished I asked, but I wasn't smart enough to ask?
So I would say, what is the one thing I would have done differently if I could do things differently, and we all would do things differently in hindsight, is I would use some of the tools that I've developed to change how I view situations, to reduce stress. And one of the biggest stress is
to change your perception of things.
Yes, of things. Because stress is it takes all the fun out of life. It takes entrepreneurship should be fun. It doesn't really add to anything. It actually makes you less creative and make worse decisions. And so anything you can do to reduce your stress, you should work on it as hard as you work on your business.
And what do you do?
So one of the biggest things to reduce stress is you got to make time for yourself. You've got to, and more importantly, you've got to use that time correctly. So one of the things you need to do is continually look at what you're doing and put it in perspective. And one of the tools of the many tools I use is that I look back, like if I'm starting to feel really stressed out, and this even happened recently, I was getting really stressed about this new video series I'm creating, and I was putting too much into it. And my wife was like, I was stressing her out.
You got to chillax already.
Yeah. So I figured I have to chill on this because, the relationship to the people around me is more important than what we actually getting this accomplished in a short amount of time. And what I realized was I was putting myself under undue stress. I was setting goals for myself that were making me and the people around me stressed out again. So what I do is one of the tools I use, I said, will this even matter a year from now? Like, what I think is so important, getting this done right away, getting it done quickly, will that even matter a year from now? Will it matter 6 months from now? But definitely, will it matter 5 years from now? And I can tell you I won't even remember it 5 years from now. I won't even cross my mind. So why am I stressed out about it? Because 5 years from now, this thing that seems so important will not, I probably won't remember it a year from now, but definitely,
I love that to keep things in perspective and disconnect from the work.
And just put yourself in the future. Look back now at things that stressed you out 5 years ago. I challenge you to even remember them. Right. Like 99.9% you don't remember. You may remember that 0.1%, but you don't remember most of them because they don't matter.
That is great advice for the entrepreneurs. Okay, Captain Hoff, unabashedly promote yourself. Tell people where they can find you, what you'd like them to buy, what they should look at. Go. Unabashedly.
Unabashedly. Well, I will just say you can find me at founderspace.com. FounderSpace. Just go to FounderSpace. You can contact me. There's a contact form. I have tons of videos. My books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, The 5 Forces. It's all there. And I love to work with great entrepreneurs.
Great. This was great. I really could. I might need to have you back for round 2 because there is so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's so much more that I know. Your wisdom is just has no limits. You're the Rocket Man. I'm going to start calling you the Rocket Man.
I think that was my dad. You're confusing me.
Thank you. I don't think the apples fall far from the tree. You launch, you rocket, you launch people on a different journey, but you're launching
a different journey
into space anyway. So we're blessed to have you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.